All right, everybody, thanks for stopping by the channel. Today is a very interesting day at the Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. I have with me a new friend. Met him through the Telegram chat group for the Unsafe Space podcast. I initially knew him as Bengali Steve, and I have found out subsequent to that he is not Bengali Steve. He's Marzook, but he told me to call him Zook. He is a crazy man from all over the world. He has lived far more experience than most Americans ever will. And the big shock here is he tends to be libertarian and a Muslim. And those two things, he should be actually actively at war with himself. Then you add into that everyone who's gotten to know me knows that philosophically and theologically, I am a Reformed Calvinistic Baptist. He's going to now have to start war with me because he's at war with himself and he can't get along with me. And he's a libertarian and I'm a Paleo-Conservative. So this conversation is probably just going to end in a conflagration and firestorm. So everybody should be looking for the fireworks. No, that's not going to happen. So we're going to call him Zook, and I'm going to have Zook. I'm going to have you introduce yourself a little bit. Give us some of your a brief synopsis of your life history, how you ended up in the People's Republic of Canada. Excuse me, Canada, and how we ended up connecting, and how you came to a little bit of your position. And then I'm gonna ask some really hard questions, like what's your favorite color and which of your kids is your favorite?
My name is Marzook, and I originally moved to Canada in 2011. I was born in actually a People's Republic of Bangladesh, and I grew up in the Middle East because my father was an expat there for close to 30, 40 years. I spent about 9 years of my later young adulthood in Bangladesh, which was a very long 9 years, it being a People's Republic and all, and not being close to my views. In 2011, I moved to Canada, and I consider Nova Scotia to be my home, and I probably always will be. I currently live in Ontario. So a little bit thing about my views. I don't know if I was always libertarian or always conservative, and the new thing that people say that since 2016 is how people got red-pilled. I am using air quotes because I am not a fan of that terminology, but the moment that I became so-called red-pilled, even though I was 9 years old, is if anybody has seen a TV show, it's not a fictional one. It's called Band of Brothers. And so growing up where I grew up, a little bit of background to this is a couple of things that people did not believe. People don't believe the Holocaust is real, which I was told for the first 9 years of my life. And people do not believe in the right of the state of Israel to exist. And a lot of other things too, but we're going to stick with those two for now. So when I was 9 years old, the Band of Brothers came out, and I saw that TV show. Turns out it was historically 100% accurate. And there is a scene in one of the later episodes where where Major Richard D. Winters finds out this concentration camp, and that's the first concentration camps Americans ever saw. And the 9-year-old me saw the depravity and how real the Holocaust was. And I had to see it again to just to figure out how, and I think I even cried because I was just so little. I mean, 9-year-old is not that old. I mean, we go to school, you learn, speak, read in English, so you have the comprehension of the world around you, and I think that was that was a moment for me, because that's when I asked myself, well, if I was lied about this event, what else am I being lied to about? And then, you know, having access to not the internet, but many books, I started reading lots of things. I mean, I read books about We'll start small. Like I read books about Thomas Sowell and like books written by him, and then even like books about Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, the American Constitution, like early works of the Federalist Papers. Like I think somebody gave me a book about Margaret Thatcher's biography to borrow, and I read that. So like that's where it begins, and after reading many books and growing up with that idea, growing up with that mentality, albeit myself, I think I identify mostly as a Tucker Carlson type libertarian. So I think you and I will probably share. Like I lots of people say that they're paleo-conservative, but when I put like when I draw the lines from A to A, B to B, paleo-conservative and my values are very, very similar. Some paleo-conservatives I've met, they're not a big fan of Israel, and they're not. They're just so isolationist that they're like America first, America only. I don't identify with that, but other than that, it's mostly I can identify with people on economics and culture and tradition and religion and faith and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I would. I had actually when I wrote a commentary for a local newspaper, and a gal was taking some issue with it, and she had actually, and this is to her credit, she this local gal, she looked up my YouTube channel. How she ended up finding it, I don't know, because I didn't reference it in the commentary. But she found it, and she watched my introduction video about why the channel exists, and she glommed onto the Paleo-Conservative, and of course she did what most people do, and she went straight to Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is not a fake news source, but it doesn't always portray everything accurately. And one of the first things that she caught on to was that Wikipedia was portraying paleo-conservatism as some form of alt-right white nationalism, because there are people who would claim to be paleo-conservative and link in with that particular type of thought process. And I walked through it with her, and we actually have developed a relationship, so to speak, of mutual respect. And she actually ended up not firing off a response to my commentary because she found I wasn't the radical that she thought. And what I would say in relationship to what you were saying about, the America first, I'm not an I'm not an isolationist. I'm an anti-interventionist, in the idea that somehow it's America's responsibility to go around fixing the problems of every other country in the world according to what we determine is what needs to be fixed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not my job or the job of the United States or the United States government to swoop down now into Venezuela and right all the wrongs. Now, obviously there's atrocities happening there, but that's a responsibility. That's a world problem, not a America problem. And I actually would say that I believe that the America first mentality that a lot of people, especially reactionary conservatives, the really strong, all their news is only Fox all the time, and the only commentary they ever listen to is from Rush Limbaugh. Those are the people who I think sometimes think it's the responsibility of the United States and the American people to go around exporting not democracy or a republicanism of sorts, but our job to go around freeing everybody from all of their oppression. And that's where my struggle is with of where I see a lot of people today. because a lot of people haven't lived your experience. Like there are many American conservatives who would say, well, gosh, if things are so rough, as we talked about in the pre-interview, pre-conversation, you pointed out that things are getting kind of rough in Bangladesh.
Uh-huh.
If most American conservative, heck, if most Americans could even find Bangladesh on a map, and they knew that things were getting rough, they would immediately feel like it's their responsibility to go into Bangladesh and liberate all those poor oppressed Bangladeshians.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, no, that's not our job. Does that make me a bad person?
No, that's absolutely not. Like, I call myself a pacifist, and all people always say, "Oh, what kind of a pacifist wears a blue uniform?" And I said, "I don't know, the kind that I am." I mean, although
That's like seeing a Sikh cop.
Well, there's lots of Sikh cops. There's Sikh police chiefs in Canada. But the issue is, you can be a pacifist, and a lot of people don't understand the fact that just like soldiers are a soldier's job is to go out and kill. That is not our job. Our job is to serve and protect the community that we are given to serve and protect, whatever that may be. It is me inside, behind closed walls, or out in the streets. So I can be a pacifist and work in that environment, even though my days are probably numbered in that industry to begin with. But as far as your non-interventionist point of view, when I was young, I heard this thing that Tony Blair used to say, is that we're going to go to Afghanistan and we're going to spread democracy. And his best friend, George W. Bush, was like, yeah, we're going to do that. Number one, America itself does not believe in democracy. That's the first point, which I did not know until years later. So there's not a lot of countries in the world that are successful republics. America and India are the two largest successful republics, and republic being the operative word.
Mm-hmm.
And they have successful models. Even though India is a very like a downtrodden, poor country, though their model of governance is kind of modeled after the United States, and it kind of works, because one of the things India does not have, just like America does not have, is they don't have a national language. Because even though everybody speaks to each other in Hindi, but they never gave their country a national language, because they thought if we give it a national language, then the people who are native to this language will start feeling superior. They wanted to create an egalitarian society, which is the same reason I guess the United States never has a national language. But even though everybody speaks English and everything operates in English to begin with, because they did not need the government to go out and say one language needs to be superior. So first of all, America does not believe in democracy to begin with. And second of all, democracy is nothing to be, the people on the left, and you can hear all these articles and commentaries on the international list, like, oh, democracy needs to be protected. Democracy is under attack. Like, democracy is nothing to be celebrated.
Mob rule is all it is.
It's mob rule. So robbing somebody is a democratic process. So two people come up to your car and pull guns on you, and you're in the car alone. So there's three of you. Two people have voted to take your property from you. So that's a democratic process in itself. And people can say that's a hyperbole, but is it not? Like, those two people have said yes to taking somebody else's property. What did you say? You said no, but your no doesn't matter anymore. And in a gigantic nutshell, that's what democracy is. Is Afghanistan today a democratic country? On paper, it is. But even if it wasn't, it doesn't matter, because there are countries in the Middle East to this day, and people can disagree, saying that we can't use those as models, like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Bahrain, Oman. None of those are democracies. They're all monarchies. Mm-hmm. But they're stable regimes that if they left untouched, and if you deal with them from arm's length distance, they work fine, you work fine, it works in harmony. On the other hand, when we go and try to do regime change like we did in Libya, like People can say up and down and left and right, Gaddafi is one of the worst people on earth, or Iraq, which is the same thing. But I'm going to call Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein, both are pseudo monarchies because they're dictators. They never face real elections,
Right.
but it works.
They took their positions by force, so basically, and we're going to hold on to them by any means necessary.
And the position and the system, and that system worked. I'm not saying that's a good system. That system worked, and it not only did it work for a geopolitical purpose, it also worked for like local purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like Iraq is a hotbed. Iraq and Libya are both hotbeds of ISIS, Al Qaeda, and many other splinter groups that are causing chaos, not just in their homes but surrounding. 20 years ago, that was not the case. I lived in the Middle East, and it was unheard of to say that, oh, you know, I didn't live very far away from Iraq. I lived in one of the cities which is bordering onto Kuwait and not too far away from Iraq. And like Iraq was equally safe and wealthy as the city I lived in, and that was the thing. And that not only gave security, because first of all, people will say, oh no, you can, if you trade liberty for security, you don't deserve either, and that's true. But in that part of the world, they don't have liberty. The only thing they have is security. So once you trade that away, you got nothing.
Right.
And Iraq, to a minimal point, actually did protect minority rights. And I by that I mean racial and religious minorities existed in Iraq and existed in harmony. Because
it was safer to be Christian under Saddam's regime before his being ultimately deposed and executed. It was safer for a Christian in Iraq than it is now, by far.
Absolutely, and that was something a lot of people in the West actually forget, because whenever you try to because here's the thing about Western press, and I gotta go off on a tangent. If you try to apologize for Lenin, if you try to apologize for Mao, they will say, you know what, let's have that conversation, right? Like, they'll allow that conversation. But somehow, and obviously if I was famous enough, this would definitely be taken out of context, is that if somehow somebody comes and starts apologizing for people like Hitler or Mussolini or Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi, they'll be like, oh my God, shut it down. We don't want to hear from this. Cancel him from life. Now, the first two are obviously evil, and there's no, I personally cannot defend them at all. But in terms of Saddam and Gaddafi, you can defend them to a point where saying that they did bad things, but they also protected religious minorities. And if you went and killed a Christian, you would suffer the consequences of a crime. They had real police who would go and investigate crimes, right? You wouldn't be charged with a hate crime or anything, but you know, it would be the same as killing a Muslim, which is not the case anymore.
Let's not even get started on how me murdering someone is worse if I hated them before I murdered them. Right?
Yeah, like Jeffrey Dahmer in court multiple times said, listen guys, I am not racist. Yeah, but you killed so many people. So the whole and that's something,
but he loved them, Zook. He loved them. So
that, right? Like that's a reverse of, I think you go do you know who Salman Rushdie is?
Yeah.
Salman Rushdie used to say something. He said, in the Western world, we have a press corps and academics and press corps who, and he called them the Butt Brigade. The Butt Brigade is like, I am not this, but.
Right.
And that's like Jeffrey Dahmer is like, I'm not racist, but I killed all these people.
Are we having one of those BBC moments?
Maybe, perhaps, but it's okay. We're not famous enough for any of that.
I'm not famous at all, so. So you were born in Bangladesh. Your dad, you said your dad was an expat. You ended up in the Middle East. how many countries in the Middle East did you live in?
I lived in one, but I've traveled to almost all of the monarchies, which I think in English is called the Gulf states.
Okay.
Like the Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, Kuwait. So the countries I have not been to is Oman, and I have not been to Qatar.
All right. So how long did you live as an expat from Bangladesh before you went back to Bangladesh?
So well, my father was there for close to 30 years, even probably more than that. I lived there for 11 years.
Okay. And just prior to immigrating to the 51st state of Canada, you, I'm sorry, that was bad. You went back to Bangladesh for the last 9 years of your formative
years. Yeah.
And you had said there again in the warm up that that was rough.
That was a very long 9 years.
And would you attribute that, Zook, to being awakened to worldviews and political perspectives and philosophical realities, or what made it rough for you in Bangladesh those last 9 years?
So yes, all of yes to all.
Okay,
and then,
well, interview's done. Thanks. Have a good day.
Yes to all, and on top of that, the economic realities faced by a middle class person, and back then the word middle class wasn't even actually a word on paper, because there were a bunch of elite people who were rich, connected to the government, and then there was the rest of everybody else. That's
Okay.
it. And like there's people that live, but like in terms of scientific patterns, like there's people who are living under the poverty line, and the poverty line is $1 a day.
Right? And that's in Bangladesh.
Yeah, $1 a day. I think it's up to like $2 a day, which is like great work.
Hey, they've doubled it. That's amazing.
They have doubled it. Yeah.
See, democracy works.
I guess because when I was in my lifetime, and I'm not even that old, the life expectancy of a person in Bangladesh went from 35 years to 65 years. And that is not for the lack of, like, it's not that the government has done anything, because there's a lot of global change, and many times the Western press will use this as an example. They said, well, because when we try to affect change into other countries, they will sometimes take some of our economic policies and get better. But the difference is that countries like Bangladesh was never attacked. They just sought out, like China, a few pocketfuls of economic policies, and they adapted them, and things slowly got better. Because when the rich person is getting rich by making a factory, he's obviously going to have some middle class and lower class jobs, i.e. creating economic prosperity. That is not because he wants to do good, that's because he wants to get richer, and somebody else is also facing prosperity in this time. And at the same time, government collects revenue, creates more infrastructure through that. So some of these things do happen. But given my mind frame of a 9-10-year-old when I moved there, followed by that the economic realities that I had to face, it was just not pretty. And some of those economic realities and some of those behaviors stay with you for life. So recently, since everybody has coronavirus, here in Canada, I'm pretty sure I've heard about it in Minnesota too. You go to Costco and you stand in line. You are standing in line for food that you have to pay for, even though it's not because there's a scarcity of food, it's because there's a scarcity of space. But that just totally reminded me of my childhood. It was like how you had to stand in line for just basic necessities.
And that was that last 9 years in Bangladesh.
Yeah, it was not always. It was not always. It would be a lie to say it was always. But whenever there is crop shortage, whenever there is flood, whenever there is ecological damage to food, because food security in that country is paramount, because almost nothing, almost 90% of the grocery items are locally produced.
Right.
They can't afford to import it.
The concept of shelf stability in food goods in a lot of places is an unheard of technological advancement.
Yeah, you there's nothing, no food is canned, nothing is preserved. You don't buy anything from the fridge. So you buy your vegetables fresh, you buy your meat fresh, you buy your rice in bulk, you buy your lentils in bulk, you buy your potatoes in bulk.
Rice would be the most shelf stable produce.
It is, but what happens is that when the agrarian, like, there's floods every year, right?
Yep.
The floods can cause rice shortage.
Right. Ironically.
So the floods can cause rice shortage, therefore you got to stand in line to get your rice.
Yeah.
There goes your entire day.
And rice is the staple.
Rice is the staple, yes.
Yeah, they make flour, they make breads and whatnot from rice flour and all of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so what was the trigger to get you from Bangladesh to Canada?
I wanted to come to America. Like, that was my #1 goal, and maybe someday it will happen. Who knows? Lord knows. But by the time I started my application process, turns out it's probably not news to the people who are listening to this. The American immigration policy does not help people who are not illegally migrating. See, if you're an illegal immigrant to America, they will give you amnesty. They will lay down the carpet to legalize you, this and that. But the legal process for just a regular guy, not like some guy with some fancy nuclear physicist skills, was just pretty much non-existent. I think it is pretty much to this day, it's non-existent, is why I haven't moved there. But somebody from Canada came to my school and explained the details to me, like they came to do some school recruitment. But I said, okay, you know what, that I can figure out myself, but tell me the rest of the process. And he said, well, the process is pretty much just like school. It goes A, B, C, D, E, F, right? You gotta wait your 10 years to get from point A to Z, but it'll get there. It'll cost you thousands of dollars, but it's a bureaucratic process. And I said, I will take it. And that's why I moved to Canada. I did try my luck in other places too, like France and Spain, but because of language barriers, I never went from A to B.
So how far along in the process are you in Canada?
I am in, I would say, either X or Y. I'm pretty much close to the end. Okay.
And now, as we talked about earlier, you married a Caucasian.
Yes, I did. Yes.
And did she convert to Islam or no? Okay. And she's Canadian?
Yes, she is.
Okay. How has that dynamic played out for you, both of you, in the world as we see it today? Has being married to a Caucasian non-Muslim in Canada made things harder or easier for you? And is Canada the leftist socialist utopian world of progressive acceptance of everyone that it's painted out to be by your perspective?
No, like that's a loaded question, so I'm just gonna try to explain it.
I know it is. That's why I asked it.
Canada wants to be wants to go there, but it's not there yet. There is lots of pockets of what you explained, the progressive tolerance and all that stuff. There are pockets of those things in big cities and certain jurisdictions. It's just like that. And surprise, surprise, those jurisdictions are very unlivable. Actually, very much so. If you think a regular American city like Chicago or New York is unlivable, try living in one of these Canadian cities, and it will just be like, oh, I thought this was bad, which is probably bad. But like Yuri Bezmenov's things, you know how this is like demoralization, destabilization, crisis, normalization. Some of these cities have come to normalization. So people in Canada will say things like, oh, look at all these American riots. We don't have any riots. And I'm like, yeah, because you're post riots. You've normalized this behavior. This is just how you live now.
So what you're saying is that there's no need for groups like the leftists and Marxist groups like Antifa and Black Bloc and whatnot to riot because they already have everything that they're demanding.
If a Black Bloc, if I'll give you an example, during the height of the crisis in 2020, when
you mean now?
Well, today is a grand day because today either the crisis continues for the rest of our lives and we fight tooth and nail to save the Western world, or we buy ourselves some time because it's November 3rd, so we'll see what happens. But I'll give you an example. One of the examples is that during the height of 2020 crisis, when all the statues were being taken down, Antifa and Black Lives Matter asked for a statue to be taken down in Niagara Falls. They didn't have to riot. They just wanted it taken down, and it got taken down. So they
didn't have to go in and take it down themselves by force. The ruling elite went in and took it.
Yeah, I myself emailed a conservative MP who promised me back in the day, because I did meet him, is that like I'm conservative, I'm fully on board, I don't believe in abortion and all blah 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 and all that stuff. And I said, listen, guy, as much as you're pro-life, and I love that about you, but you're not going to pass any policies because that's a federal policy to begin with in Canada, and you have no power. But why don't you actually do stuff that you can do? And he said, oh, we'll do it when I can. So I emailed him and was like, listen, this is your jurisdiction, this is happening, and he gave me like a cookie cutter letter, and that's when I realized that he's just another politician. So nothing. That statue got taken down. So a lot of these areas are post riot, so they're in normalization mode. That being said, Canada is very much like the United States in terms of culture. A lot of people are egalitarian. A lot of people are accepting. If you like, for example, I married somebody out of my faith. I don't think ever my wife has said, oh my God, what the heck did I do? Or I have said that. Like, nobody has said that. Other people have made other people have made actual racist comments towards us. But as a general rule, that's not what society is like, and that's a good thing. Even though a lot of people, just like BLM original BLM Canada has said a lot of things about interracial marriages and whatnot, and how it should be abolished and we should walk it back. And that's obviously going to have a lot of aftermath to people like me. Good thing I don't live in one of those pockets, thank God, and I don't plan on living in one of those pockets anytime soon. So I don't see the aftermath of that. And as far as being Muslim and my wife not being Muslim, it has never been a problem. It is only a problem if other people make it into a problem, and we have never made it into a problem so far.
And for my viewers, like all four of you, who are Christian, when Zook uses the term egalitarian, he's not talking about Christian church leadership. So no nasty emails or comments. We're not talking about Christian church leadership. Egalitarianism in Christianity is a hot button issue. So
oh, is it? I did not know that.
Yeah, I know you. I know when you're using it culturally, what you mean by egalitarian.
Yeah.
Within the framework of Christianity, their egalitarianism is specifically about church leadership and whether or not women should be pastors or elders. And
okay.
so it's literally one of those things, like if you ever want to cause a firestorm on a Christian's wall, go out and bring up the term complementarianism or egalitarianism, and you will see arrows fly.
That's egalitarian. That the word egalitarian is used in a different context. Then that's
absolutely. So you don't fit the mold of the traditional view, not necessarily what a traditional Muslim would be, but you don't fit the view or the mold of what most people would consider Muslim positions to be. By and large, in the United States, everybody just assumes the Muslim vote's going to go to a Democrat. By and large, in the United States, most people are going to assume that Muslims are going to vote to the left, even though the religion itself would, if you took the name or the title of Islam away and just looked at a lot of the doctrinal and philosophical and theological positions, most people would probably err on the side of assuming that they're all a bunch of hardcore fundamentalists who would only vote for a Republican. But in the United States, by and large, that's not how it goes. What causes you, and you mentioned Band of Brothers and feeling lied to historically and philosophically, but what is it that you have seen in the modern or postmodern world that has caused you to step out on a very precarious ledge, whether it be in Canada, career-wise, or even as a Muslim, and be willing to speak out about the things that you see happening around you and the things that you hold, not just believe, but that you hold as dear personal political convictions?
Little known fact about the Muslim voting bloc, especially Arab American Muslims in United States, is that before 9/11, they predominantly voted or aligned themselves with the Republican Party. Most of it is not due to, and most of it is not due to global issues, because global issues was not on the table. It was due to cultural issues like things as abortion or family values. Because a lot of the Republican Party's platform is like very traditional, old school American philosophy, and that which they identified with. And on top of that, tax breaks are good for everybody, right? So they identified with that, and that's something for a very long time I have said about the Republican Party, is that George W. Bush did some massive damage to the party in terms of not saying the things what he said, but doing the things that he did, because actions speak louder than words. And he alienated a group of people, and probably a lot of people will say rightfully so, and maybe rightfully so. But you can fight a war abroad, but you can deal with the stuff here at home differently.
Mm-hmm.
And by that I'm not saying go appease and go let them build a mosque next to 9/11, but if you're gonna in an egalitarian society, you could have dealt with things differently. But I think over time, it will it has equalized itself out to a point where now it's square one, and they can go from there in terms of gaining more Muslim Republican votes. Last election, I think 1% of Trump's votes came from Muslim Americans. I think something like that. It's a very small number, and so it's not all lost. It's not all 100% lost. Not all gone. So the problem is twofold. One is there was a massive damage done after 9/11 due to the Bush administration's response, and I think like even if there was a Democrat in power, the damage would have been done anyway. I think they just didn't know how to respond to this because they essentially created a global affairs into a race issue, and then they messed it up, just like Republicans do. And like if they took a Trumpian approach, it's like, you know what, we're gonna deal with it as it goes by, as opposed to like we're gonna start attacking people.
Mm-hmm.
Then would have worked out properly. A lot of people have said that, you know, Trump's Black Lives Matter approach is not the one that we like because he's not doing anything about it. But the thing is, not doing anything about it is doing more than doing something about it, because the moment you insert yourself into these problems expand. Let the problem expose itself fully, and then you can start saying like, this is wrong, that is right, that is right. We can find a middle ground somewhere. And on top of that, Western press does not give time to people like me. A lot of people know who Linda Sarsour is. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows who Dr. Judy Zusser is. Dr. Judy Zusser is a Republican. He's an Army vet. I think he's a Navy vet, and he has an organization called Muslim Americans for Democracy. But nobody knows about him because he's out there saying that, listen, we can live in this egalitarian society. We can exist with my faith and also same time value American Constitution, because we can value the fellow American man. But nobody gives him time. Like there's an Australian imam called Imam Tawhidi. Nobody gives him time. Like people only give radical people time because, number one, Western press is mostly subverted and ran by people who are students of, knowingly or unknowingly, the Frankfurt School, and they like the chaotic figures, because the chaotic figures plays two ways. One, it's palatable to themselves, and it also shows the other side, conservatives, libertarians, whoever don't want that lifestyle. They go, oh my God, it's so bad. And it probably is, because if you constantly keep bringing people like him, it is. Like Reza Aslan is one of the figures that CNN loves to use. He goes on Twitter and he says, you confirm ACB and we'll burn it down. Right? He gets to say that on Twitter. And then when Dinesh D'Souza says to him, once the confirmation is done, is that, okay, your turn. And then he says, guys, can you find his address for me? So he gets the press time when normal people don't. Like, I'm not famous enough, but I'm pretty sure for every Reza Aslan, there is another person who is normal they could have given press time to, but they don't. And that's why this dynamic is created today. Like for me, faith is something that you have in your brain, or I guess some people can say in your heart. You don't have to mix the two together. Like obviously some political positions you can, but what does being Muslim have to do with American foreign policy in Nepal? It doesn't, nothing. Or what does Muslim have to do with anything with the taxes in the infrastructure taxes in Georgia? Nothing. You can operate those two separately, and that's what I choose to do.
Do you think, by your experience, that Muslims are marginalized not by the average, and I'm just going to talk about it from a US perspective, but Canada is not much different. Do you believe that Muslims are marginalized more by the average American or Canadian, or mostly marginalized by the leftist, progressive Marxist types as a tool for leveraging support, so that they'll look at the Muslims and go, oh, you're so oppressed. You're so oppressed. Come to us. We'll make sure you're not oppressed. And in doing so, they'll buy into the idea that, oh, I'm never going to get a fair shake because I'm Muslim.
Muslims, yeah, that's what it is, because once 9/11 happened, because before 9/11, Muslims were never that oppressed, subjective group that they could pander to, but once they realized that such a group exists, it's a gift that kept giving, and they kept taking advantage of it, right? And then that's how you gave birth to Ilhan Omar and Linda Sarsour, and they get to be in places of power because they got to keep telling themselves that, whatever we do, we can't get ahead. Well, if you can't get ahead, how the hell did you get into Congress? And I would say that's ahead, because like one of the things that leftists say is like, now they say is like racism is power plus, what is it?
No, it's hatred plus power.
It's hatred plus power.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I say the worst things about Ilhan Omar or Barack Obama, it doesn't matter, even if it is actually racist, like the real term. I can't be racist because guess what? I will never have as much power as them.
Right.
Like never. That's impossible. I will never serve in Congress. I will never be the president of the United States. So by their logic, that's a very obtuse worldview that I just can't crack, because did they not see this coming, that somebody was going to come out and say, oh, I'm going to do the worst thing about Barack Obama, and I'm going to make sure it's all about his race? Because guess what? I can't be racist because he's more power than me.
Well, and let's just be honest. Ilhan Omar would never be in the position she's in her home country.
Well, first of all, I don't think they have elections. Second of all, I don't think they allow women to run or women to be into the position.
Right. Yeah. So tell me, where would you be more oppressed? Right.
Where would I be more oppressed?
No, not you, but people like Ilhan. She still talks about being part of the oppressed class, and how the United States oppresses her and other Somalis and other blacks and other minorities. But I'm over here saying, look, and it's probably not a great argument, but it's a truth. Like, you literally, not only are you not oppressed here, but you would never be allowed to even say anything in public, let alone hold public office in Somalia.
This is how I see you. This is how, whenever immigrants in the West say we're oppressed, this is how I say it. Did country X allow you in? Is that a yes? Okay. And did country X allow you in? That's number one. And number two is, are you allowed to complain about that you're oppressed? If a yes to both, then you're not oppressed. Because if you would be oppressed, country X would not be allowing you in to begin with. And somehow, by hook or crook, you got in, and oppression was real, you would not be allowed to complain about it. And this is the same thing I say about when people say, oh, police brutality. If police brutality was real, you would not be talking about it. You would be dead. You are trying to get yourself canceled.
You're not even famous. You're going to get canceled.
And that's not even hyperbole. Like, if oppression works from, when you say oppressed, oppression is actually done by the authorities. If the authorities don't want you around, you are gone. You won't be there anymore.
Right.
Doesn't matter where you are. Government actually has unlimited power. Doesn't matter. You can live in the most freest country in the world. You can live in the state of Texas, which is the freest state in the union. If the government wants you gone, you are gone. You cannot fight your way out of government. Government has killed, in the name of many policies, communism, Nazism, Marxism, Islamic theocracy, this and that, killed hundreds of millions of people whenever they wanted. So if you get to complain about that you're oppressed, you're probably not oppressed.
So that brings me to your career of choice. So you go through all of this in this far off, unimaginable land for the average Westerner. You have lived a life that even the poorest Westerner who was born and raised in the West could never imagine.
True.
let's just be honest. The poorest people in North America, outside of Mexico, in the United States and in Canada, are by far wealthier and live better lives than the middle class of most places that you have lived in your life.
Yeah, like if you do live in one of those countries, Saudi Arabia is not one. Like none of those monarchies, they're very rich countries. Like nobody's poor there. Like but if you consider Bangladesh or India or any of those places, the middle class is much poorer than the richest like the poorest person in New York or San Francisco, whatever you may have.
Right. So you've lived through all of that. You come to North America, you immigrate through the legal process, you land in Canada, and you choose to enter into which career field?
I worked as a correctional officer, and so I chose that because I wanted to serve my country the way I knew how I could. Obviously, without going into much details, it has caused me some actual pains. But I don't regret anything. It is a choice I made, and if I have to do it all over again, maybe I would proceed with more caution. But it is still something that I did cherish, and I think more people should do it, because it gives you a perspective about not only how government works or it does not work, and and also, you know, you want to talk about this or that, or how easy you want to Monday morning quarterback about the crime fighting. Be a part of it. See how it works. See if you see now how does it feel when other people Monday morning quarterback you? Because in my class there were actual people who are leftists and probably who would align themselves with BLM if it existed at that scale back then. I think a couple months on the job has changed them. It's they went from that to fully red-pilled.
To use the phrase that you hate.
I just don't know what else phrase that is there. Like I hate saying that, oh, they turned conservative over time, but they didn't, because if you ask them about, hey, what do you think about cutting tax? What do you think about privatizing healthcare? They're like, oh, hell no, that's an American system. We can't have that.
Well, that there again, you know, the vast majority of Canadians now were born into and grown up under a single payer form of healthcare, so they don't know any different.
It's you have no idea how bad it is in Canada. You can't have a conversation about this. People will freak out. Like people will go full like they do in those videos. They can't, like, talking about universal healthcare is a sacred cow. You cannot touch that. No politician ever comes to touch it. Here's the thing, microcosm in Canada. Every Canadian city that has a hospital will always publish articles about the hospital's chief, CEO, or director, or whatever they're called, is making millions of dollars. Every year there'll be an article like that. You pick a city, any city, and such an article will exist. And then, after reading the article, person X, Canadian person X, will say, I can't believe after him receiving $1.5 million in compensation package, I still do not get fast healthcare. Why doesn't that money go into healthcare? Valid question. But then my question to it is this: when you stop complaining about the salary of a CEO at a hospital? Because when? Is it when you privatize healthcare? He goes, how? Is it You never complain about the salary of the Samsung CEO. You're clearly using a Samsung phone. You're eating Kraft dinner. You don't complain about that. He goes like, well, I bought it. And I said, that's the thing. If you bought it, then you wouldn't feel so entitled to knowing about this business. You're either satisfied with the product or not. Right now, you are entitled to a service, which whenever you do not get, you get to complain. And they go, well, you know, it's otherwise it would be too expensive. And I said, I don't know what it would be otherwise, but the people serving are private citizens that are working there. All the equipment comes from private entities. May that be a bed to the floor to the building, right? What the government is doing is only doing delivery. So so what you're complaining about is the delivery of the service, and you never complain about the delivery of your product from Amazon. I used to say this to somebody if they were to listen to me. This is a small story I made up. Person X and person Y both have health problems. Person Y goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, that's your health problem, you need surgery. Person Y waits, 6 months later gets a phone call, goes to get surgery. Person X has a healthcare problem, calls the doctor up and says, hey, I have a healthcare problem. What do I do? The doctor says, why don't you come in tomorrow and I'll look at it. They look at it and then say, why don't you come next week and we will do your surgery. What's the difference between person X and person Y? Person X has a dental problem. Person Y has a body problem. Dental is fully privatized. So you can ask for surgery whenever you want. And dental surgeries don't really cost that much because I've gone through the process myself. But nobody is willing to listen to that you know, if you privatize the systems, maybe the process would be more efficient. They don't want to listen to it. They go, oh, no. That's just a false equivalency. I said, but you know, if you pay for your dental, you get good dental and you get the surgery whenever you want.
Do you think that it's a do you think it has less to do with how much they would have, what they would picture having to pay for it? Because let's just be frank, when it comes out of your check, your paycheck and taxes, you don't really see it. You're not
Sure.
feeling the pain of it the same way, unless you're acutely aware, you know. And a lot of people aren't. I mean, let's just be honest. Here in the States and in Canada, most people aren't looking at the amount of income tax that's taken out of their payroll every week or every 2 weeks or whatever the case might be. Would you say that they're just not seeing the cost of it, and therefore they're assuming that it's just much cheaper for them than it would be to pay for it through insurance or through out-of-pocket expense? And also, it must be safer. It has to be better care because the government's providing it.
I don't think anybody buys that it's safer care because government provides it. And a little bit has to do with taxes. But you start feeling that taxes once you start making, I think in Ontario, once you start making more than $50,000, you start seeing it because it starts going up. Like it shoots right up. Like if you make like $55,000, you pay like about 45% in taxes. So, and it just goes all the way up to like 55% at some point, or even 60% at some point once you meet certain thresholds. So you do start seeing it. But my personal opinion about people cherishing this is marketing. Because we have two major issues that are public entities, which is one is provincial healthcare, which is provided by the province, which is public, and public access TV, which is they have a public broadcasting network that's paid by the taxpayer. 100% of the taxpayer pay for it. Only 5% of the taxpayer actually use it regularly. That's beyond the point. But so I wake up in the morning, and I wake up in the morning on a mattress on a Casper mattress that I bought, on a bed from Crate & Barrel that I bought, and then I go to the bathroom to brush my teeth with an Oral-B toothbrush, which I bought, and a Crest toothpaste, which I bought, and then I go downstairs to have coffee, and I have Nescafe, which I bought, and a cup, which I bought. Then I go turn the TV on. Once I turn the TV on, it's public broadcasting system, and the first thing they say is, "How great is your healthcare today?" They're marketing it to a point, because you've used all these private sector products, but nobody's told you how great they are. But the first thing they tell you great is, listen, the public broadcasting system will say, number one, we're the best. Number two, public healthcare is the best. So they have a huge marketing strategy that gets to people, and people are not seeing beyond it. And that's a culture problem and not much of a money problem, I think.
It's cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, because people are constantly told, like to come to such a conclusion that all these private sector products, right? First, you have to be a libertarian to understand that all these are private sector products, right? But they are not there. They're already liberals, or they're already leftists to say, oh, forget all those capitalists. The first thing I saw is a free, like how great our healthcare system is. So that is where I'm going to focus.
Yeah, would you have an Oral-B toothbrush if all toothbrushes were paid for by the Canadian government?
I don't think so. I think whenever the government pays for something, it just becomes like it's a uniform delivery. I mean, you might not have Oral-B. The government might just say, you might have Oral-B. You might have a $1 Oral-B that everybody gets. That's all you get.
And you wouldn't be able to go and buy it off the shelf.
Right? Like you'd get the 99-cent Oral-B that's made in Mexico, and everybody gets that. That's all you get, because the government's contracted it out to Oral-B. But they're not buying it for $1. They're buying it for $5, though, by the way. Because when the government buys it, they have to inflate the prices.
Right. Because that manufacturer is still going to get his bang for the buck.
Yeah.
Right. Which is precisely why everybody is so adamant about the United States. Ironically, they want the United States to stop allowing patents on medications. The vast majority of medication treatments for different cancers and whatnot are developed in the U.S. and all the other countries in the world that are on the single payer system or in universal healthcare, they want the U.S. to drop all these patents because they want the ability to go in and get it so that they can give it away, but they can't afford to develop these things.
And they don't, so they end up buying it at these inflated prices.
Right.
A lot of these universal healthcare countries don't have pharmacare. Canada does not have pharmacare. So you've got to buy your drugs full price or covered through insurance, whichever it may be. France does not have pharmacare. I think England does not have pharmacare, but I think it does have pharmacare. But I think Northern Ireland does not, something like that. Like a lot of these universal healthcare countries do not have pharmacare, which is actually good. Don't give them ideas about installing pharmacare.
Let's not get them started.
Yeah, because there's a movement in Canada and Australia about going about again and bringing in pharmacare, and I said, no. Actually, at least I can buy my drugs properly. Let me have it. You're gonna kill me.
They're gonna kill me. Oh, Zook. I want to buy my drugs legally. And when you say that, it means something totally different than what that means here in the States.
Well, I know what it means because I've worked in that field. I want to buy my drugs legally, there was a point of my life, right? Because there was a point in my life when I had pain in my teeth and I didn't have insurance and I was out of my home province. So I wasn't covered at all. So I had no access to healthcare. And I thought to myself, I could buy illegal drugs, and not narcotics. I mean, illegal drugs to reduce my pain easier than I can buy legal drugs. Because to buy a legal drug, I have to fly back home, see a doctor. The doctor will give me a prescription and go buy the prescription. Here, I can just go to a black market and buy it. Because here's another thing. Universal healthcare is not as universal as you think.
No.
So if you have universal, if they implemented universal healthcare in America, this is how it would look like. If you had universal healthcare in Massachusetts and you go to New York, guess what? You're out of healthcare. The hospitals will not see you.
Wait a minute. No, that's not true. Nobody in Canada ever gets refused care.
Yeah, that's only for emergency purposes.
No.
Like you have. That's for emergency.
Nope, you're wrong. You live there, but you don't know. No one in Canada ever gets told, I'm sorry, we're not going to see you today because you're not, this isn't an emergency. And no one from Canada ever comes to the United States for healthcare. Ever. No one ever. Ever.
That's the funniest joke. Every month, 20,000 Canadians go to the United States for healthcare.
Well, not right now.
I don't know what right now, but that's a number of the federal Libertarian Party put out a couple years ago. That every year.
I know for a fact that they do because I live and work in the world of the Mayo Clinic.
Okay, what's a Mayo Clinic?
See, you guys don't even know. The Mayo Clinic's like one of the premier hospital.
Oh, okay, it's a hospital chain. Okay.
Yeah, it's not even it's a chain, I guess, but it's a research and teaching. The people like the sheiks and the princes and stuff from Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and all that, and Qatar, they fly in here constantly flying into this area just to go to the Mayo Clinic. And I know for a fact that Canadians are down here all the time for their health care because they can't get what the specialty care that they need in Canada. So they come down here and pay for it out of pocket.
It's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time, because if wealthy Canadians are leaving Canada for the United States for getting care, which means it alleviates some of the pain from, it's good that they are not accessing regular Canadian healthcare, so it puts a little less pressure on the system. Because we don't have any alternatives, right? So we have to look at how we can utilize the system the best we can. And the bad thing is that other people are suffering while they get to have access to fantastic healthcare.
That's the crux of Marxism. Even in a perfect Marxist utopia, the wealthy are still going to have everything they need, and the middle class and the poor in a Marxist utopia are still going to suffer, because the wealthy and the ruling elite are all going to be allowed to go do whatever they want to do and get whatever they want to get, while all of you plebes suffer.
Here's a question for you. So if you went for a heart surgery and they botched it, can you sue the hospital?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now ask me the same question.
Oh, I know you can't.
Exactly. It's the same way you can't, like, if a fireman shows up to your door and like they didn't do the job that you liked, right? It's a bad example. You can't sue the fire department for that because it's a public service. You can't really sue public services like that.
Unless it's law enforcement.
I don't do the in Ontario, you can probably sue law enforcement a lot, but they have weird rules in Ontario. You can't sue officers. You can only sue departments.
Yeah, here in the States, you can an officer can be named in a lawsuit, but unless he's been proven to be negligent or not abiding by department policy, he's indemnified. And some people call it qualified immunity or discretionary immunity. So they can be named, but they can't, as long as you're abiding by policy and procedure and training, best practices, they can't attach to you personally. And if you're not abiding by those things, you're not going to have a job, and so they can sue you anyway. But yeah, you never see a fire department get sued.
Oh, people love firemen. People hate cops. People love firemen. When I went for police recruitment, they said, if you want to be loved, go be a fireman.
Right.
Nobody likes a cop. I said, nah, whatever.
So in all of your experience, you're how old are you now?
I just turned 29.
29. So in all of your life experience, and there again, I'll just continue to emphasize you've had more than the average 60-year-old in the United States has. In that time, even living in Canada and going through some of the stuff that you're going through now personally in your life, what would you rather have? Would you rather have no struggles, no suffering, no concern about where your next meal's coming from as far as how am I going to pay for this? Or would you rather have everything handed to you and be taken care of cradle to grave, meal to meal? And why have you arrived at whatever perspective you have arrived at now that you've been in the West for a few years?
To think that somebody's going to give you, to think that somebody's going to take care of you cradle to grave is such a Western fetishist idea. And I'm not even going to use a better word for it. Like, they fetishize it so much. If you went and said that to, I'm not going to even use a third world country. If you said that to, I have family in Japan. If you said that to a Japanese person, they would laugh you out of the room. It is a concept that, like, it is a concept of Marxism that did not exist in 1930s America. It exists today, but it didn't exist then. And like, you go to places like Korea and Japan, they would laugh you out of the room. Such a thing does not exist. And as for me personally, I had all my struggles, and I struggle every day today too, because like, clearly I'm not rolling in Joe Rogan money. So, but if you're not struggling,
that's going to change because we're going to end up doing a podcast on a regular basis, and we're going to give Carter and Carrie a run for their money.
Have you seen Carter's earlier podcast? He's just doing it himself. No video, just pictures with like random other libertarians. I've seen them. They're good. They're good.
That's where we're going, Zook. You and me, the TNZ show.
Yeah, I wanted to do a podcast for a very long time, but I never got to it because, I mean, I can't talk to myself, and I'm a nobody. And I really hate using the YouTube platform because they are going to kill big channels in the coming picture anyway. But as far as
So anyway, back to the question.
But back to the struggle. If I didn't struggle the way I struggled in my earlier years, I don't think I would value what I have today. And that's the crux of a lot of these people that never left the West. Like, they say, oh, I left America, I went to France. I said, no. Did you go to like, oh, I went to Brazil, but did you go to the favelas? No, you didn't. Like, you need to know where real struggle comes from. There are people in this world who live at under $1 a day. There are people in this world who from cradle to grave has been homeless. And that's just a way of life. They cannot get out of that.
In Marxist countries.
In non-Marxist countries too. I mean,
yeah.
all these countries have, like, the countries that are to this day poor have adopted some form of Marxism to be that at that stage. Like, may that be in Africa or Asia or South America, they have all formed some sort of Marxism. Like, the more capitalist the country is, the more free market that they have adopted, the less people on the street there is. But they don't know that the struggle exists. And by struggle, they don't mean like, oh my God, I can't access healthcare. Struggle is, you don't know. You wake up in the morning and your mother tells you, Marzuk, you need to pack your bags because today we need to stand in line for rice. And not because we're poor, because we have the money to buy rice, but we don't know if we will be able to buy rice. So So you go and stand there for 24 hours to buy the rice because you don't want to be there later so the rice runs out. That struggle. And that struggle with people who have money. Now imagine you don't have money. That's even worse. When I was little, my mother used to tell me this story because Bangladesh used to be a full-on communist country. Like it used to be under the thumbs of Brezhnev, because when the French first liberated, they got all the materials from Soviet Union. She said that they had no food in her house, no food at all, and she was a middle-class family. She's not even a poor family, but she would go to school, and her classmate would eat Norwegian canned tuna with crackers. Guess what her father did? Her father was a local commissar. He was supposed to, he got all these charity products from Norway, who gave it so that he can distribute it. He wasn't distributing them, he was eating them himself. And that's what Marxism brings. Like it's a lot of problem with power, a lot of problem with poverty. Like I could go on for months, forget days, about how many problems, like what kind of struggle it is. So when these kids they say, oh, our struggle is somebody said something, somebody's not giving us a space in our university. No, that's not a struggle. That may be a problem, but that's not a struggle. That's not a struggle. One of the things that to this day I vividly remember, and it was my first couple hours in Canada, because I arrived on an overnight flight. So do you know what a Tim Hortons is?
Yeah.
Okay, so Tim Hortons is like the Dunkin',
basically, right?
Coffee shop, right? It's a national gem of a coffee shop. So in the morning, I go downstairs of my building, and there's a Tim Hortons, and people are standing in line to get coffee. The first thing I ask myself is like, why are you standing in line for coffee? You can make this at home. Like it's middle of January, it's minus 30 degrees outside. You could have made this at home. Second question is like, I stand in line to get the coffee because I don't have any utensils, so I'm just gonna buy myself a coffee. This lady gets a coffee, and she ordered a double-double. To American audience, double-double is 2 sugars, 2 cream. She orders a double-double, and she gets that coffee. She takes a sip, and she throws the coffee onto the wall. And she goes, what the F is this? I ordered a double-double, and you gave me a triple-triple. How dare you? I was like, that's a problem? It's a coffee.
And that's where the first world problem memes comes from.
And I was like, it shook me. I was like, what? What? Why is this a problem? Tell them to change. Tell them to add a little bit more coffee or something. Like, why? I wouldn't be mad if I ordered a coffee and they gave me tea. It's still a drink. I'll drink it and go on with my day. To this day, that's what I do. Because I was volunteering with a group, and the lady said, oh, let's get ourselves hot chocolate. And then everybody got hot chocolate, and I got a cup of tea. And I was like, oh, this is tea. So oh, let's returning the car. No. We don't need to do that. Why? It's a drink. I'll take it. They're not poisoning me. People get so upset about these things. And that's when you know that they haven't seen real struggle. Like, I'm not saying all Canadians. A lot of Canadians see struggle because they live on farms that are dying. They live in towns that are dying. They work in industries that have been shut down, just like the Rust Belt and stuff. I live in a Rust Belt myself. Industries are shutting down. So these people have seen struggle. But when you're throwing your coffee on the wall because it's not the perfect order, and then 2 days later you're protesting that whatever pet cause that you've caused on that, global warming is happening and cows cause farting and whatnot, your struggles are not real.
What you experienced is a cultural paradigm shift where so here's what I'm hearing when you talk about that, Zook, is I'm saying I paid for this. I want it to be correct. However, I'm not going to throw it against the wall and scream and holler and make a scene. I'm going to go in and say, hey, this is what I ordered, and what you're looking at is I'm coming from a place where standing in line just to get rice for for the meal, maybe for a day, is a blessing. And so that cultural paradigm shift that you experienced then was exactly what you said. Why are you standing in line for coffee? I thought things were supposed to be better here, right? And we do those things in the West without any thought. No thought at all. Because there isn't a single person in the West, especially in the United States and in Canada, that's truly oppressed. There isn't. There's nobody in the West who's really truly oppressed. And the wonderful thing about that is something that you said way back at the beginning of this, when you were referring to Iraq and the idea of security versus liberty. We do these things because we have liberty.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The problem is we have taken liberty for granted. Instead of having liberty, we have rights. And we believe that, I mean, when's the last time you heard, especially in the United States, outside of the circles that you and I run in the chat group, when is the last time you heard somebody, just your average schmo, talk about liberty, his liberty over his rights? They don't, because we've come to the place where it's all about asserting my rights. And if I can't assert my rights, then I'm being oppressed. And the difference for a person who's responsible is just that. It's responsibility. I have liberties, and with those liberties come responsibilities. So I have the freedom of speech. I have the liberty of speech, but I also have a responsibility to be reasonable, to be responsible in my speech. I have the liberty to go out and buy a $10 cup of coffee if I so choose. But in doing that, I have a responsibility to not make an ass of myself in the redress of the grievance of it not being what I ordered. And we've lost that. So now I have a right to have you make this perfectly and serve me, and I also therefore have a right to treat you like crap if you don't do it exactly the way I want. And that's because I believe no one here understands true oppression. They don't understand oppression isn't just a thing that some person in power can do to you. Sometimes oppression is not being able to even get products, not even being able to feed your family, not necessarily because some entity is out there actively trying to harm you, but just because the system is so broken, the system is so flawed that everybody's suffering outside of the ruling elite.
Yeah, and a lot of Americans are so detached from that suffering. Is that, and not to say that Americans and Canadians did not suffer, they did, but that was 3-4 generations ago.
Oh,
and
for sure.
And we forgot that. Like the Great Depression is not that far away.
Yeah, 100 years. I was just a little less than 100 years ago. My grandmother was born in 1920, died in 2020, and I think of the things that she lived through. She lived through real oppression.
Right. And what I am talking about, my own life's experience about poverty and scarcity, that was a thing in the United States. That was a thing in Canada during the Great Depression. And today is a historic day. If the election goes blue, you might see another Great Depression in the West. It's not, because scarcity is. I don't know about Minnesota, but when I go to the grocery store now, I used to have the choice of like 10 brands of chickpeas. 6 of them would come from the United States. Guess what? Now I don't. The that came from the United States are not stocked on the shelves anymore. The shelves are still stocked, but now you get to choose the 4 local brands that exist. So minor amounts of scarcity has already started, and if it elevates, it's just going to get worse. So the problems that I explained before, you'll have to stand in line for things.
The irony of all of this, and I think you'll probably see this, the irony of this is people who will, and you brought up today being a big day. It's a pivotal day. I said in a Facebook live video on my Minnesota Black Robe Regiment page on Facebook. I said this is the most pivotal election of my lifetime. You know, I'm 50. I started voting in '88. This is by far the most pivotal election, and the people out there who are just actively considering voting for Biden and Harris, or Harris-Biden, depending on, you know, what your perspective was.
It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
Those people who are actively considering voting for them, or even people in Canada who are polling for Biden and Harris, because, and this is it, it's a single issue. They believe, they really do believe that the conservative right, the Republican right, is racist. They believe it. They absolutely are convinced of it. No amount of evidence to the contrary is going to change their mind. And they believe that if Trump wins another 4 years, that we are going to become some sort of dystopian some sort of dystopian white supremacist nation where they're going to be rounded up and taken off to slave camps, and they're literally voting strictly for that, to prevent that from happening by voting for the people who are actively going to destroy the Constitution of the United States, and in one way, shape, or form or another will look to put anybody who disagrees with them into some form of re-education camp.
Well, they've already said Truth and Reconciliation Council and many other things. My father, like, I'll go back to myself. My father is a war vet. So during the liberation, my father fought. And obviously, it's a communist country, so my father fought. But one of the things he was promised was that once the war is over, you get to keep your guns. Correct me if you have heard this before. Once the war is over, the guns that you were provided, so they had 2 choices. You can stay in the military and you get to keep your guns. Like, you get to stay in service, blah, blah. Or if you go back just being a civilian, like if you take the discharge, if they discharge you, you get to keep your guns. The first thing when he came home was he saw the secret police at his door trying to collect his firearms. Even before, like, that was one of the first things when he came home. And that's when he said, if this, I'm out of here. And he went to the Middle East for whatever amounts of years, because he knew that this is just going to go downhill from here, and he's not going to be any part of this. And that's what it is. They condition you into these places, and then you can't get out of there. They go, if you ask a leftist person, is that okay? Trump is racist. Give me 20 examples. They don't get 20 examples. They call Ben Shapiro. I myself am not a big fan of him, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. They call Ben Shapiro a Nazi. Okay, the man is as Jewish as it comes. Like, I don't know, like, that goes, like, if there's a word more than lying, that's what it is. It's okay. That's where the word subverting comes from, right? Like, they themselves are Nazis. Well, they want to project. They go, oh, the right, especially in the context of the United States. They go, ever since these riots started, right? They go, Nazi this, Nazi that, Nazi this. Guess what the Nazis did before they started? Do you know the Night of Kristallnacht? They took all their opponents and they broke all their windows, right? Guess what happened? That's what the left does. So, and then they go, "You're a Nazi for doing what? For believing that you shouldn't be breaking my glass?
Mm-hmm.
For believing that?"
Well, look at Saul Alinsky, you know, and his rules for radicals. And one of the things that he says is you isolate your opponent, you separate them from the pack, and you isolate them, and you demean them, and you insult them, and you disparage them. And you know, I'm paraphrasing, but that was the whole principle. You disparage them, you call them names because it's powerful. You don't go after the institutions because institutions don't hurt the way people do. You hurt people. And when you do that, it makes people easier to conquer. And that's what they're doing. And what they have done is they have effectively managed to, for lack of better terminology, to convince people of a lie, to get them to vote for them so that they can turn around and do to them exactly what they say. And as you said, it's a subversion, but it's actually a form of transference. They've transferred their thoughts and their goals onto another person to make them the bad guy so that they can come in and be the savior. And that's what there again, I don't think people who have lived their entire life in the West can understand what's happening. You're sitting here as an insider outsider watching these things happen, going, I'm warning you. I've seen this all before. Or,
I'm not the only one. Like, Florida's filled with Cubans. My best friend is a Cuban Canadian, and that's why we sort of connected when we first met, is because we kind of have the same background. Except Cuba is worse, because when you stand in line, you're actually standing in line because the government is giving out free food, right? You don't know if you'll get that food. You just know that you might. The only difference in Bangladesh is you wait for the line because you get to pay for your food and you get it, but you just don't know if it's there. Like, there's so many Americans that are warning about these things.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just not an economic matter. This goes, like, Marxism is everywhere. Like, it's economics, it's culture, it's tradition. Like, miscegenation laws. That's something that is so unique to the West. Other places don't have these laws. Like Loving v. Virginia is one of the things that people always talk about, the miscegenation laws. Try passing such a law in one of these many, many countries that are not part of the West.
Right.
Right? They're trying to turn this back to not having that. Like, during the height of the protest, they said things, and they believe it, right? They believe these things of racial superiority or racial supremacy, but not in the white format, but in the black format, or sometimes not even in a racial format, but in like an ideological racial format of like this leftist identitarianism. I don't even know how to glob it up, because they're kind of post-racial, but their identitarianism, like, it follows all the tenets of racial superiority, but it's not for a race. It's for a train of thought. And I go, you're going to cause the kind of problems that you're asking to be stopped, which doesn't exist. You're creating them. You're creating these problems. At one point, there was a campaign BLM put out that said half black, half guilty. And I was like, okay, do you not want any allies at all? Like none?
I think it goes back to what I've been saying and what you've been saying, is that the West, the modern West doesn't understand real oppression. They literally don't. I mean, we are so far disconnected from the days of seeing minorities have dogs turned on them for truly peaceful assemblies. People do not understand that, and that doesn't mean that every one of those assemblies in the late 60s was actually fully peaceful. And the reality is that some of them were and some of them weren't. But we are so far removed from Martin Luther King marching into Birmingham peacefully, and there again, struggles and differences with his positions theologically, and even his links and ties into Marxism. All of that aside, the generation today that thinks that they're oppressed will never experience what those folks experienced. I talk to older, like literally older Black men today, like guys in their 60s and 70s, and they're an interesting lot, because oftentimes they will look down their noses at the younger generation of Black men and say, "I'm so tired of your whining. I'm so tired of your complaining." Your fathers and your grandfathers literally had to be afraid of being rounded up and hung in some places, and we're talking in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, absolutely. These things didn't go away just because the laws were. The cultural change happened slowly. It didn't happen overnight.
And now you have them talking about things being metaphoric lynchings. And you talk to some of these older guys who lived through that, who saw friends and family members who experienced that. And he said, and then you turn around and you bastardize that by calling what's happening to you because you got fired from your job because you couldn't be there on time, or you showed up high, and you call that a metaphoric lynching. And this was a conversation that I had with somebody, a few months ago. He's like, I don't want anything to do with this movement. I'm over it.
That's why you don't see a lot of older generations on the streets, right? If it was such a big deal, you would see a lot of older. This is a youth movement of they're making demands. They're making absurd demands that can never be met. And I call it bigotry of low expectations, because they've created like situations like the kind of demands BLM is making. If there was a movement called WLM, which is White Lives Matter, and they would demand same things, heads would roll so fast. They'd be like, are you kidding me? That's impossible. We can't meet these demands. Nobody can meet these demands. Even if we started meeting these demands, it would be a violation of civil rights. And if it wasn't a violation of civil rights, it would be a violation of the Bill of Rights. Like, you can go back and back but they want to make, so a lot of these demands are Marxist demands, is that I get to choose what to do, and I get to make the rules. And you see some of these things in microcosms. Like, I don't know if you saw the Madison incident where they came up to a guy's house, started calling him racist and stuff, and he had a Trump flag and all that. He didn't even come out. He was having a beer, watching Amazon Prime, and then he took his shotgun and he was just standing there at the window. And they called the police on him. The police came and arrested him, and that was really disappointing. I think a piece of me dies every time a law enforcement officer carries out an edict as opposed to following the Constitution.
Yeah, I know that feeling. So,
like, the two officers came and arrested him, and they clapped. I'm like, what happened to ACAB? Like, so they don't want the cops gone. They want the cops they want to become the cops, and they don't want to follow. And they can say, oh, they can go to the academy and become the cops. No. They don't want the academy. They want to become the cops overnight, minus the systems that clear the water for the water to be purified. Because let's be honest, you and I have both been through that process. if you were a white supremacist, you will not make the cut. There's no ifs and buts about it. They root you out, and they have been rooting these things out for 30 years now. Back when they didn't have the internet and like these electronic technologies, they would have some hardcore detective come down and just grill you like a criminal, right? That's what they used to do during the interview process. And my partner, one of my FTOs was from that back in the day when they just came in fully armed, looking scary in a room. I mean, it wasn't an interview; it was an interrogation. And if you passed it, you get to be on the street. Like, so there is no such thing as a white supremacist cop, and that's why even if you have like racial supremacy ideologies in or like bad ideas in your head, and you somehow became a cop, like say you could, but the training process followed the realities of your job will change who you are.
Or eliminate you.
Yeah, that's like if you have like minor tendencies and somehow you got to this last stage. Like I have had people who were black and they were like Black Lives Matter type people, but once they started doing the job, they changed. They're like, yeah, things are pretty fucked up.
Yeah. You censored yourself.
Yeah. I don't like swearing on I don't like swearing that much because I feel like when people swear, it takes away their like the value of the message that they're saying. That's why Trump doesn't swear. He just says nasty things like it's like Sleepy Joe. He's gonna sleep.
So I want to wrap this up because this is going to take a long time to edit. The one message, and I ask this of a lot of people, especially when I do my man on the street interviews. The one thing that I always ask is, especially when I was doing interviews up in front of the governor's mansion here at the different rallies, I'd always say, if you had one message for the governor right now, what would it be if he would come out and he picked one person to talk to you? And obviously that doesn't really work here. So what I'm going to ask in this situation is, so Steve,
Steve.
So Zook, you're talking to the American population, to the American electorate right now.
Yeah.
And obviously no one's going to see this before the election is done. Well, you know what? They might.
They might. Who knows, right?
No one, but by and large, no one's going to see this before the election is determined. But if, as an outsider looking in, if you were going to talk to the American electorate right now, looking at the two forks, at the fork in the road, and the path to the left and the path to the right, with your worldview, bringing to bear on it, being Muslim, being a minority in the West, having been in a career field that a lot of people are choosing to hate now, and also being a libertarian who is a minority, who is in a career field that people are choosing to hate, who has lived through all of those things. What message would you send to the American electorate today?
What I would tell people is, in a nutshell, I'd love to tell people that vote Trump, and not just vote Trump. You should always vote America first, constitutionalists. And I don't mean Republicans. Like, there are Republicans who are shitty. Don't vote them. Learn who your Republicans are, vote for them. And if that does not fit your bill on election day, write somebody in. That's how I would say you should vote. For now, I would say do that. And that's what you should be doing always. And don't vote with your heart. Vote with your constitution. That's how you should always vote. Not just today, not this election, and not just tomorrow. You should always vote with what is the most constitutionalist candidate that is going to do your bidding. That's all you need to do is have a constitutional candidate in office, and the whole constitutional process is like they'll leave you the heck alone, and you go on doing your business, and that's all you should be asking from your government. Most of government's job is to leave you alone. Find the candidate that's going to leave you alone the most, is constitutional the most, and once you have that, then we can get down to the nitty-gritty of foreign trade, foreign affairs, and all that stuff. Those are all secondary, and I know today is a pivotal day. So hopefully, the next time we have these conversations, we can have these conversations about how we can harp on our side to do better, and not how to win. That's just my take.
No, I love it. I love the fact that you said don't just vote your emotions or your heart. Vote the Constitution, no matter who it might be. That's phenomenal. Well, I thank you for your time. I'm going to end this here so that my computer can process it. It's probably going to melt into a pile of computer slag by the time it's done. No, I appreciate it. I know you have a life of your own and things you got to get working.
Oh, that's okay.
So, and your wife is probably over there going, can you get off of the computer so I can actually start doing some work in the house?
Probably.
So, no, thank you for your time, Zook. And I'm going to see how this first Zoom interview / conversation, how it pans out, and maybe we can start picking topics and talking about them in a more focused way in the future.
I'd love it.
See how it goes. So I appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you very much. You have yourself a great day.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.